Welcome to my video of my miniature rooms I call the Rodney Rooms. These two rooms recreate in miniature 1 inch to 1 foot scale what I hope is going to look to you like 2 rooms in a house in Rodney, Mississippi, 1860 to 1880, that thereabouts. I'll make the video in 3 different sections. This first video I'll tell you about Rodney, Mississippi. And in the second section, I will show you items from my house that are recreated in these miniature rooms. And then the third section, I will try to get the camera to not wiggle too much and get into the rooms to show you the items in more detail. I don't want to give you vertigo, so I'm trying to keep the wiggling of the camera to a minimum. First of all, I'll introduce Rodney. As I said, these are imaginary rooms in Rodney, Mississippi. Rodney, Mississippi is a ghost town. It exists to this day, but there's not a whole lot of it left. I went to Rodney on a family trip in the 1970s, and it was an extraordinary trip into Rodney because the road that you're on is actually part of the Natchez Trace, and the road bed had sunk about 6 feet down below the level of the forest floor that surrounds you. From the traffic over the multi years. So you were driving down a dirt road with dirt on both sides of you, and over top the tree canopies had knit into almost a solid mass, so it blocked out the sunshine. You felt like you were driving through a tunnel and going back, literally back in time. It was a wild feeling. And when you got there, the deserted buildings, they had an eerie sort of feeling, not like they'd been left there for 100 years, but almost more like they just were left yesterday. You could almost feel ghosts. It was an interesting feeling. Obviously, I never forgot it. My imaginary rooms are that recreation, what I would hope they would have back then. Rodney was originally called Petite Gulf. It was settled in 1826. It was called Petite Gulf because up the river was the Grand Gulf, the Big Gulf. But later on, they changed the name in honor of Judge Thomas Rodney. He was the presiding judge at the Aaron Burr conspiracy trial and a brother to a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He did not always live his life on the East Coast like his brother did, and like most of the revolutionary figures did. He came west to a certain degree. I don't think he made it to Rodney, but he did come west. He was brave. The reason that they had Rodney to start with was because this was the place where you forded the Mississippi River. So Rodney's not high on a bluff like Natchez and Vicksburg. Rodney's low on the Mississippi, at the ford. The road through Rodney was then called the Texas Road because that's where people traveled through Rodney and forded the river, and the road went on to Shreveport, Louisiana. From there, you went into Texas to settle the territory of Texas. Rodney, in its day, was a boom town. It had, according to tax records and census records, we have about 5,000 residents. It had a bustling port on the Mississippi. That Mississippi was where you got all your supplies in, and you sent your exports out, and you traveled up and down to visit because it was safer and cleaner and cheaper and faster than any other form of travel at that time. In its heyday, it had 35 stores, it had hotels and banks and saloons and probably a brothel or two, but that's not mentioned. And it also had the Mississippi First opera house in the state was in Rodney. One source states that the first telegraph line ever built was from Rodney to Fayette, Mississippi in 1837 and was in existence up to 1890. Mark Twain recalled his life on the Mississippi as a younger man. He published Life on the Mississippi in 1883. And in it, he's talking about traveling south on the Mississippi in, quote, "In due time, we passed Grand Gulf and Rodney of war fame and reached Natchez." So when he says about Rodney of war fame, he is talking about an incident that occurred in April of 1863. The Union Army and Navy controlled most of the Mississippi at that point, and they were docked in Rodney. The USS Rattler was there, and men on the USS Rattler wanted to go to town and go to church services. So they left the boat and went downtown to the Presbyterian church. And in the middle of the service, the Confederates surrounded the building because obviously word got out. And there was a gunfight, and most of them were captured. Some of them were hurt. I don't think anybody was actually killed, but some of them did make it back to the USS Rattler, and they informed the captain, and the captain began shelling the town. And there is still, in the front brick wall of the Presbyterian church, a cannonball to this day. But the life of Rodney was, that was like the highlight of the war, and that was one of the last big things that happened. The beginning of the end came about 1865. Mother Nature did it. As everyone knows, including the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Mississippi changes its channel whenever it pleases. It pretty much does whatever it pleases. And a sandbar formed in front of Rodney at that low point. And at some point, the sandbar got too far up for the Mississippi to travel over it. So the Mississippi went around it, and it just moved west and left Rodney, I would say high and dry, but since Rodney wasn't high, it left Rodney low and dry. At that point now, there's still land there now. Mississippi has moved about 7 miles away, and it right now is between 3 and 7 miles away most of the time, because when it floods, this place is so low that the floodwaters come in, and then you're closer to the Mississippi. But Rodney floods periodically. It's had 2 really bad floods in the last 20 years. So what was left when I was there, there's probably not a lot of it left at this time. Then in 1869, 4 years later, a fire broke out and took out most of downtown. And there was little incentive to rebuild because Rodney was just no longer Rodney. In 1876, the railroads came to Mississippi, and at that point, travel and shipping were all taken over by the railroads from Mississippi paddle wheelers and Mississippi steamboats. So if you want to go back in time, get on the internet and Google Rodney, Mississippi, and you can see some of the pictures, and you can also see the cannonball in the front wall of the Presbyterian church. Today's Rodney's population is about 10 to 20, depending on how many families are living there. There's only 1 or 2 families that have lived there in a very long time. Now I'm going to show pictures, still pictures, of items in my house that are recreated in the miniature rooms. This is from my living room. This is a life-size reproduction of the hands of Adam on the left and God on the right from Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, painted 1508, 1512. This is a photograph. It's very old. I've had this poster, I think, forever. My sister would not let me hang it on the ceiling, but I thought that was a great idea. It's photographed before the restoration, and of course it doesn't look like that now. It's much more colorful, and the cracks are all gone. This is from the center panel, of course, where God creates Adam and passes life into Adam. Beneath it is a lyre table, also called a harp table. This style dates back to the Duncan Fife period, popular between 1800 and 1840. Greek image, of course, of the lyre fit in very nicely with the Napoleonic Empire, so it's called Empire style a lot. This is not obviously an original Duncan Fife. It's a 20th century reproduction, but it has dovetailed drawers and a marble top and a Victorian era rose. It probably is early 20th century. It has pendant decorations and a fake mahogany finish. Over the fireplace in my living room, this is a reproduction of the painting, The Triumph of Death. It is a very disturbing painting. This was a vision, 1562. This is kind of what they envisioned the Last Judgment was going to look like. It portrays an army of dead people fighting the living people, has a background that's very barren and scary. The Flemish school, of course, northern Belgium, was where Peter Bruegel, the elder, lived, and he was in that school. We're more familiar with paintings of this genre by Hieronymus Bosch. but Bosch is more, he's more fanciful. It's more he's more fantastical, more, that's not the right word. Whatever. He has fantasies. These are realistic looking things. And that makes a stark contrast to the picture of God and Adam on the other wall in the living room. This is a grandfather clock in our living room. This clock was made by Walter, my husband's uncle. His name was Everett Whittle. He lived in Rushville, Indiana. He was a professional woodworker. And we have the clock, and we have candlesticks and a plant stand done by him. Very meticulous workmanship, and the clock, of course, works, and it has a lot of bells and whistles. It has a federal style piece on the top, which is a little bit earlier than my 1840 room, 1860, but it would have been an heirloom at that point, and it's an heirloom to us. This is a chessboard that we brought from Agra, India. It's made out of stones and semi-precious stones embedded in marble. The men who make this are descendants of the family that originally decorated the Taj Mahal. It's on an octagonal table with 4 legs in our hallway, and I took the chess set off of it so that you could see the table. It's very beautiful. All of the doors in our houses have multi-lights like this. This is a 15-light door, has a crystal knob, and above it is an octagonal window with 2 of my biggest glass banks in the window. From here, we're going into our bedroom. This is a barrister bookcase, also called a lawyer's bookcase. They were extremely popular in the 19th century because they featured glass doors that opened and then slid back into the case. Therefore, you could leave the doors open and everything exposed, or you could close them with the glass. We use ours to store Walter's antique toy steam engine collection. Also in the bedroom is my blanket chest. It's quite large, and I can't get back far enough from it in that room to really give you a good picture of it. But it is a 6-board blanket chest. That means that every piece on the top, the bottom, and all 4 sides, each one is made out of only 1 board. And of course, that indicates the size of the tree that was used when it was made. It also dates it to being quite early. Inside it has a glove box, and the box lid of the glove box actually does not have a hinge on it. It rotates on a dowel, which they didn't use metal hinges unless they really needed them, you know. And this piece has, other than the hinges, has no nails in it. The bulbous feet and the decoration at the bottom may have been added later because they do have nails, and none of the body does. But being made of 6 boards, it indicates the size of it, and has dovetailed. All the joints are dovetailed, as you can see. And all the windows in our house are extended half-round windows. They have spoked, like a wheel spoke, mullions. Those are the little dividers. And our windows have functioning shutters. The stained glass iris is one of a pair. The other one hangs in the kitchen. And up on the left, on the wall, is a cuckoo clock from Germany. It was given to my parents by a man who served in the military in Germany between 1945 and 1949 and brought it back. It is hand-carved black forest, of course, and unfortunately, it doesn't have the deer on its top because the deer ear, one of his ears broke off, and I haven't found it yet. So I have the deer off of it, trying to figure out how to fashion another ear for the poor fellow. This is the wood stove in our bedroom, the Carthage wood stove. The reason it looks so ratty is because it's actually used. We heat the bedroom with it on the coldest of winter nights. It says Carthage in the front. Above it says Quincy, Illinois. And notice that Illinois was abbreviated then ILL. It's marked 16 on the front and has on the other side Excelsior Stoveworks, and I'll show you those letters in a second from the second picture. On top is a kettle for steam because wood heat is very dry. And to the left is a sad iron that belonged to my mother, Ruth Calloway of Sherrills Ford. Now I'll show you the side that says Excelsior Stoveworks. And I think you will notice that when you see the miniature. You will notice, I'm sure, the blue willow wallpaper in the music room, and there's one wall papered with it in the bedroom. And there is almost, there's more blue willow china in here than I actually own. But I've been in love with the blue willow pattern since I got a tiny tea set from Santa Claus in 1953, which I still have. And the blue willow pattern has just been a constant in pottery and ceramics since it was first developed in 1779, Shropshire, England. It was not a Chinese or Japanese design. It was actually an English design, but it was based on what they were seeing exported out of China. And somebody dreamed it up, and it became immensely popular, and it remains popular to this day. The blue willow toilet set in front of you, all 11 pieces, dates from, we think, about 1900 to 1910. There's a 1904 date on the bottom. We don't know whether that was a number that indicated the date or whether that was the style number or the pattern number. We just don't know. These sets were given out one piece at a time as premiums for tea when you bought tea. And that story was authenticated by the appraiser that I had look at it. She said that these pieces were imported by Van, V-A-N, China of Trenton, New Jersey, and they were given out as premiums when you bought tea. I bought the set in Bat Cave, North Carolina, somewhere around 1980, and the dealer there told me he had gotten it from an old man who lived in Asheville. Also, beside that, you'll see the candlestick and a greyhound figurine. And just slightly there on the right, you will see a small silver-plated grooming set. Down in the bottom, you have the wastewater bucket and the potty on the left. They are sitting on a blue willow cloth, which is on a pine table. The pine table has turned legs and wooden knobs. It has dovetailed drawers. You can't see it in this picture, but it has ears. The back piece has curvatures at both ends. That was very popular in the Empire style. So we're talking, styled in the 1810 to 1840 range. I bought it in a Statesville antique shop, I believe in about 1995. It's probably late 19th century. This is one of my prize pieces. This is the first big antique purchase I ever made back in 1973. I lived in an apartment, and this is a hand-turned maple cord bed. Now, cord bed means that there's heavy string or cord strung underneath between all the four, the front and the back and both sides, to form a net underneath you, a stiff net that you put the ticking on, and you would fill your ticking with straw, or you'd fill it with feathers if you were lucky and had a lot of chickens. This bed, you look in the back, you can see the Empire style ears, and when I say hand turn, that means that all of the legs were turned on a treadle machine, lathe, and done, and they match. And it's just extraordinary how woodworkers do this beautiful stuff. It was probably made in New England. It dates to about 1840 or a little before that. Also, you'll notice at the base of the bed, I have a quilt rack with quilts on them. And although you can't see it there on the bed, it's just a book, but the book is the complete works of Sherlock Holmes by Conan Doyle. This is a better picture of the pictures above the bed, and I think you can see the complete Sherlock Holmes there on the bedspread. The bedspread, by the way, means a lot to me. My mother bought it for me in 1963 at the Amish fair at Hershey, Pennsylvania. And that they don't have those anymore, but the Amish ladies hand quilt these beautiful pieces, and this is a fairly simple one. Some of their designs are extraordinary. Get on the Google and Google Amish quilts, and you will be blown away by what these ladies can do. Above the bed is a treasured set of pictures in a frame that dates back to 1972 when I came to North Carolina. I bought the frame and refinished that, the first piece I ever refinished. And the pictures show in the middle that road that I was speaking of that led into Rodney. And on the left, one of the extant houses. That picture was made, we think, about 1930, 1935. So it may or may not be there today. And on the right is a picture of steamboats, paddle wheelers at the port. Unfortunately, this port is not Rodney they're showing, but it does give you an indication of what it would have looked like then. Over on the left wall, I have a reproduction of a Renoir to the left. It's two girls at the piano. It's an oil painting of Renoir. On the right of the blue willow platter, I have what is called The Music Room, and it was painted in 1878. It's now owned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. It was by a Hungarian painter named Mihaly Munkaczy, and he married a rich Parisian widow, smart painter, and he got to paint a lot. And this picture is actually a picture of a room in his apartment, his flat in Paris. Very big, huge grand piano in it, with a greyhound on the right down at the floor, which you can't see. But the cool part is this: that there's this lady in the back on the left, in the background, this old lady in a rocking chair. And she looks either extremely irritated or extremely bored. Depending on what time of day you look at her, you get a different feeling from her. But it's kind of a neat painting. On the wall between them is a blue willow platter, and that was given to me by Joe Sheffy, my brother-in-law. I'm sorry for the wiggle. I just bumped the table. And these pieces I'm showing now are in my spare room, and my spare room has always been called Rodney. So these pieces are in Rodney in real life and in Rodney in miniature. This is a plantation desk. It is made of solid heart pine, 4 to 5 inches thick. It is all completely hand turned and hand planed. The Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts in Winston-Salem authenticated it for me from photographs. They said it dated to about 1810 and was probably made outside of Charleston. You notice the ears on the backsplash from the Empire style. A plantation desk was a kind of a do-it-all piece. You kept your clothes in the bottom 3 drawers, and all of those locked, and then that writing surface folded up to become a flat surface, and it locked. So you kept your records and your a lot of plantation people used these in their offices back then. So you kept all your money and everything in there. So this piece is larger than it looks here, but it has beautiful proportions, and I was thrilled with it when I found it. I bought it, I believe, in about 1985 at an antique store up in the Brushy Mountains, not quite to the big mountains. All of the drawers in it are individually fitted, so none of the drawers fit in the other slots. Even the little teeny drawers inside the writing desk portion are individually fitted. You can't exchange them. On the desk, I'm going to show you those things a little bit in more close-up in a minute. But on the wall above it, barely seen over there on the far right, is a pewter candle sconce. And above the desk on the top left is a original Currier and Ives from 1860. It's called the Beautiful Persian, and it is said to be the only Currier and Ives that featured a greyhound in its illustration. The other three are all lithographs. The one on the bottom left is a 20th century lithograph, and the top two are lithographs from the 19th century. And on the desk, first of all, in the middle is a Seth Thomas key wound clock from the 1800s. The Greyhound inkwell on the left dates to the 1700s. They were made in England. Right to the right of the Greyhound with the feather is a little box, and it shows the standard of Ur. We don't really know what the standard of Ur was. It's in the British Museum. It is from Sumer, dating back to about 3500 BC. And this little box was a souvenir from the British Museum showing that. Also on the top of the desk, another Greyhound figurine and a very important bowl. The bowl, the silver-plated bowl there, is a museum reproduction. It was the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, of a bowl made by Jacob Bolen, Boelen, who was a Dutch silversmith in New York. Of course, you know, it wasn't New York City then, and it wasn't English, it was Dutch. The bowl was made about 1680. It is, the decorations on it are called oblate decoration, kind of a heart-shaped sort of thing with feathers or beads or berries, all kinds of different things. This style of bowl was popular as a trophy way up into the 20th century. It has two handles on each side. And to the right of that is two Orient Express lamps. They're named after, of course, the famous Orient Express train. Down on the writing surface, you will see a pewter plate with a linen napkin and a pewter napkin ring. To the right, a pewter spoon. To the left, a clear glass with a blue base, and on the top, a blue willow mug. Oh, and under the clock is a blue willow cloth also. These are also from my Rodney room. They hang on the wall above my piano. On the far left is a reproduction of Vermeer's The Astronomers, and you wonder why he's looking at a globe if he's an astronomer. Wouldn't you think he was a geographer? No, they painted the images of the sky. Of course, they were using nothing but their naked eye onto a globe, because they thought then that a globe of heaven surrounded the globe of earth, and that's how we looked at heaven. Down below that is a reproduction of a Canaletto painting that hangs in Milan. I've seen it in Milan. It is, the Canaletto was, of course, a Venetian painter, and he painted scenes of Venice, a whole lot of them. They're very common, and they were souvenirs. They weren't really postcards, but they were souvenirs at the time. This picture is actually called the Basin of San Marco in Venice. He later, right after this painting was done, about 1745-46, he moved to London and became very successful there, painting images of their famous tourist attractions in London. His real name was Giovanni Antonio Canalo, but pretty cool if you're going to paint canals to be called Canalo. And on the right, the big one is a music manuscript that I have. It is a page on vellum, double-faced, double-sided page from a gradual, which was a Catholic choir book. They're huge because not everybody had choir books. You only had one. So everybody had to be able to see the notes from where they sat in the choir. The dating of it is problematical. It could be as early as mid-14th century. It could be as late as early 16th century. Because the notation for Catholic music did not change. They still notate Catholic music on 4 lines and 3 spaces. But that style of notation there was very popular and remained, when it changed into that style from neumes, it remained popular for years and years. And these things came out of Central Eastern Europe when the Soviet Union broke up. So you could buy these things. They were finding these old books and they were tearing them apart and then selling them page by page. So there's no way of dating it. I do know what it says in Latin. It could be quite early because it simply wasn't needed anymore, and churches don't tend to throw things away. They just tend to put them in storage. So down beneath it is a photograph of Uncle Tobias with his favorite black greyhound. And to the right is an illustration from a book on dogs from the 19th century. And the top one shows a greyhound, and the next dog down below it is a bloodhound. This is a picture of the mantle with some of my glass banks above, and you'll notice Uncle Tobias doesn't have any glass banks. He never got into that. Notice the oil lamps and the greyhound figurines, the blue willow there, and to the left, far left, a greyhound cane. And this is one of the shelves in my Rodney room. I have greyhound statuettes. And the teapot shows greyhounds on one side and bloodhounds on the other. The bloodhound picture at the top, that's my Hugo. And over on the left is a German Stein. And the monkey picture belonged to my grandmother, and I wish I had a copy of that, but I don't. Beside my piano is this darling little table. It's pine, mid-19th century probably. It does have hinges, but it has dovetailed drawers, and it has hand-cut nails where there are nails. It has two leaves that fold down, and when they're open, the supports are made of wood, and they rotate on a dowel to save metal. The legs are hand-turned. One leg doesn't quite match the other, and it actually kind of juts out a little bit to the wrong angle, like somebody that wasn't very good tried to repair the table at some time, or the man who made it was old and going blind. I don't know. But it has an appeal that way that I find that fascinating. Nobody ever bothered to fix it. On top of it is our piano boxes. And the one piano box in the back there is sitting on a mirror. The oil lamp has a blue willow shade. This is a photo of a chest, an oak chest we use in the bathroom. This chest belonged to my husband's grandfather. It is oak. It has brass pulls, marble top, and on top of it is a full silver-plated grooming set for a man or a woman. And these are two of my best chairs in Rodney, in front of our fireplace in Rodney. All that stuff has to be taken off of the stove, obviously, when we fire it up for the winter. So I have to move it everywhere. To the left is a lyre chair. Again, the Duncan Fife idea, but this, of course, is a reproduction dating to about the 1940s. On the right is